Before we begin, this video is sponsored by Vesi. For me, summer in Ireland is a battle of conditions, from hot and cold temperatures that in a flash turn a lush, peaceful walk into a muddy, wet hike, which my dog Cheddar loves, but if you're not prepared, it can make days out particularly unpleasant. Thankfully, Vesi are the perfect solution with their stylish, comfortable and adaptable footwear and accessories that provide phenomenal, borderline magical waterproof protection. I for one love their weekend sneaker and Cityscape Classic for their lightweight, breathable and flexible design with added grip support for unexpectedly slippy terrain. However, when summer sparks my more adventurous side, Vesi's Stormburst low-top shoes provide extra traction and stability when trekking through uneven, unpredictable places, which is a plus when Cheddar loves to constantly go off the beaten path. Stormburst low-top shoes remarkably retain all the features of the weekend and Cityscape shoes, but with the sturdy reliability you would expect from walking boots. These bad boys sit by my door for morning and evening walks with the dog, and have become my essential go-to shoe for long-form activities to prepare me for whatever the elements may throw at me. Heck, they allow me to venture into parts unknown, thus adding a jolt of inspiration to my usual walking routes. If you're ready to embark on the ultimate summer adventure, dive into the excitement, embrace the thrill, and capture unforgettable memories by going to vesi.com/ryanhollinger to find the perfect blend of style and practicality, and enjoy an instant 15% off your first order at checkout. There are probably worse werewolf films out there, but in my tiny perspective, this absolute abomination fluctuates between so bad it's good, outright boring and uneventful, and strangely fascinating in what it might be attempting to do. Cursed had a fair bit of hype behind it when it released in 2005. It marked the reteaming of legendary horror director Wes Craven with Scream and the faculty writers Kevin Williamson to create what was presumably supposed to be another genre-bending meta-satire, this time focusing on the classical creature feature. However, Cursed quickly became infamous for being cursed, with aggressive studio interference and development hell, when producer and studio head Bob Weinstein got his grubby little hands over it and eventually released a version half a decade following its initial draft that allegedly, although almost certainly, undid everything Craven and Williamson had envisioned, leaving it a disowned mess of toxic incoherence that likely only got released because so much time and money was stubbornly invested into it. There are numerous sources I'll attempt to use to document some of this film's bastardization, but given I want to avoid retreading ground that's been covered by countless other critics, and embracing the shameless overthinker that I am, I want to at least try and conceptualize what this film might be going for, but oh boy, do I have my work cut out for me. Cursed tells the story of two orphan siblings, Ellie and Jimmy, who one night are forced off a dark and lonely road by a mysterious animal, and upon trying to help a survivor of another crash, are attacked and marked with the curse of the werewolf. Now, while that might sound like a general synopsis, it's actually what a fair chunk of the film attempts to build towards, as Jimmy spends much of his time googling werewolf mythology and coming to terms with the fact he and his sister are bound to transform during the next full moon. In between this, it does very loosely attempt to implement a bit of a whodunit similar to Scream, where I think you're meant to question who of several characters is the main werewolf spreading the curse. However, given reports that Weinstein allegedly pieced this together himself, there's a painfully evident lack of characterization or story structure to sustain any tangible sense of mystery. In fact, just to give you an idea of how poorly managed the production was and how it ended up derivatively lifting directly from Scream, according to Trace Thurman, after 90% of the original film was shot, Weinstein halted production and demanded what basically amounted to an entirely new film, with a disgruntled Jesse Eisenberg even later claiming that the film went through 4 separate reshoots with constant baffling changes to the story and characters. For example, Ellie and Jimmy weren't even siblings in the original version, and there was supposed to be a plethora of other characters who were either removed completely despite having significant impact on the original plot, or simply reduced to bare-bones side characters who you could remove yourself and it would change nothing about the story. The most notable in particular was Scream's Billy Loomis actor Skeet Ulrich, who was meant to play the disillusioned son of a billionaire who seemed to have a fair bit of complexity behind him, but he dropped out due to increasing frustrations with the constant production pauses and changes to his character, that what we're left with is this dud of a character. The thing is, even putting the horror stories of the production aside, my biggest criticism watching it was that I was happy for it to be a really shitty B-movie, permitting it had some fun, gross, gnarly kills and creature effects to sustain my attention, but oh my Satan-loving Jesus God, I do not know where to begin in describing this film's regression to PG-13 CG, whatever the absolute living fuck this is. So, you may know the infamous story about when they made the Thing prequel and Amalgamated Dynamics produced these amazing practical effects, only for Universal to replace it with CGI because CG was not only the trending thing at the time, but they basically thought practical effects looked cheap for some reason. Well, all things considered, that didn't really impact my enjoyment of the film, and I think it turned out fairly decent in my opinion, even if it was a complete derivative of the original stuff. Look, that's a different topic for maybe a different day. In the case of Cursed, when you've already butchered what was likely a cleverly conceived story given the talent behind it, all you really have to do is sell this as a creature feature with good, memorable effects work, and fuck me did they have it in the bag by hiring Rick Baker, the effects genius behind many heavy hitters like An American Werewolf in London, perhaps the greatest werewolf transformation in cinema history, and they scrapped almost everything his team produced. Surely this was an act of sabotage. This film screams tax write-off. I know movie making is hard and whatever, but how do you mess up a werewolf movie? Van Helsing came out the year before it, and it had much more effective CGI werewolves in it. Honestly, the fact this movie even got finished makes me think someone sold their soul to the devil, and it sure as hell wasn't either Weinstein brother, because neither of them have one. I'll come back to the werewolf effects later on, but for now we have to take it for what it is rather than what it could have been. So this takes us back to watching two temperamental siblings going through petty surface level high school drama and romantic tensions while slowly unraveling to the effects of the curse before eventually seeking a way to overcome it. The film opens with Bowling for Soup as a welcome reminder of the pop punk era injected into every late 90s, early to mid 2000s teen-centric American film, and of course they're rocking it out to a song about Red Riding Hood because unsubtle ironic foreshadowing. We're introduced to Jenny and Becky, the latter of whom is played by Shannon Elizabeth, in a cameo I assume is meant to partially channel Drew Barrymore in Scream, given she was one of the highest profile stars in the film despite very limited screen time. In fact, I actually confused myself for a moment thinking she was in Scream before realizing it was Scary Movie, and I forgot how warped that film made my perception of Scream. Jenny and Becky are ominously warned by a fortune teller of a beast that feeds off the moonlight, but instead of following through with what you would expect would be the cold opening kills, we're then introduced to the siblings before they later encounter Becky alone in a wreckage, where she finally serves as the opening kill 15 minutes into the movie. Some of you might recall the infamous production behind The Snowman, a psychological thriller with Michael Fassbender that made absolutely no sense because they didn't finish shooting the film. Well, I would argue this film is not just as bad, it's possibly worse, because things just seem to happen in a random order where scenes either go nowhere or characters just end up inconsequential to the plot, and before you know it, you're sobbing in the bathtub. It's a bad omen for what's to come, as nothing that precedes it sustains any level of tension or intrigue to keep you engaged, despite the faintest efforts to make the siblings seem more complex than they ultimately are. For example, something that stood out to me was how much it leans on the siblings being left with PTSD, because they apparently witness Becky being torn apart despite never showing us it, and yes, that is pre-fame Nick Offerman gracing us with his much needed presence. It seems as if they're trying to add further turbulence to their relationship, seeing as they allude to the death of their parents being correlated, I believe, thus the attack bursts a long suppressed bubble of grief and potential mental illness, but I'm already reading too deeply into it. We start to see Ellie become ravenous for blood and increasingly standoffish with her co-workers, which is a matter that's already affecting her life, as she's under constant pressure working for the Craig Kilborn talk show. Meanwhile, Jimmy's personality begins to change completely as a result of the increasing powers granted to him by the curse. Initially, it splits the film into two potentially interesting avenues. Ellie is suffering from the effects of the curse, while Jimmy begins to relish in it by going all Tobey Maguire emo Spider-Man by changing his look and using his increased strength, confidence and bravado to go after the girl of his dreams. The thing is, if the focus was truly there, it could have opened the door for a tragic sibling rivalry that sees Jimmy Jimmy want to sustain the curse while Ellie wants to get rid of it completely, causing a clash in motive. What we actually get are both siblings barely interacting with one another until the plot demands they reconvene for the climax to discover and destroy whoever gave them the curse so that their lives can go back to the happy, healthy, there's no tangible conflict to suggest the curse had much of an effect on their lives anyway. It kinda comes off as more of an inconvenience than an urgent matter needing addressed, seeing as they themselves never pose a real threat to anyone, while the main big bad wolf just goes around killing because we're 35 minutes into this movie and only one person has died. We are watching a creature feature where in the space of 1 hour only 3 people die, all of which are off screen, so you can't even use the argument that it's quality over quantity. The first time we properly see the werewolf is when Jenny from the opening is stalked in a parking garage following a party where she flirts with Ellie's boyfriend Jake, and to its credit, it does actually lean more heavily on the practical effects, adding some weight and physicality that's lost when the CGI takes over. However, despite elements of a cool design, which I assume was Rick Baker's work, the delivery just falls flat because the scene is just too well lit and too basic in delivery to evoke any sense of fear or suspense. Now, while this kill does play into a neat little twist later on in the story, whether or not it's him, it's very obvious Jake is a werewolf because his character is so blatantly wrapped in tension and mystery. Literally on the very night the siblings are attacked, Ellie awakens to noises downstairs and soon finds the front door lying wide open, only for Jake to jump at her from behind saying he needs to talk. He is obviously meant to be a replica of Billy Loomis. The tension is meant to keep you on edge, but the execution is so abnormal, thus it doesn't sell it as a misdirection. Regardless of how strong his relationship is with Ellie, you don't just wander into your girlfriend's house at the dead of night, leave the door wide open, hide for a bit, and then appear behind them. By the way, the film even has the audacity to have Jake be some designer working on a Hammer horror themed exhibition or something. I don't think it's ever really explained, and we have these classical monsters in the background as a nudge nudge wink wink to the golden age of the creature feature, and all I could think is, how dare this film associate itself with these icons of horror? I understand this was likely a very fitting homage in the original version, serving as a sort of ironic choice given that one of the film's 2 climaxes, yeah there are 2 of them, takes place with the Wolfman in the background, but given what it's become, it's creatively insulting at this point. Anyway, back on Jimmy's side, he starts using his enhanced senses to impress a girl called Brooke, which catches the attention of a bully called Bo, who Jimmy then starts to make homophobic remarks towards when his cockiness begins to consume him. The gist is that Bo is eventually revealed to be a closeted homosexual who confides in Jimmy, believing that Jimmy has feelings for him, hence why the conflict exists between them, and it is touching because they do develop a friendship in the end, but it's so poorly conceived even though it has potential. Like I said earlier, Jimmy going from wimpy nerd akin to an insecure Randy from Scream to arrogant egotistical dickhead poses an interesting moral dilemma in how he uses his powers for self-gain, but it ultimately goes nowhere despite it being the exact reason why the villain behaves the way that they do. There is a painfully blatant opportunity to set Jimmy up as a surprise twist villain for the second climax, given how the curse is supposedly uncontrollable to those not pure-blood werewolves, yet instead, Jimmy's changes are purely superficial and undone when he teams up with Bo despite no real rapport being developed between them to convince me that they now suddenly like each other. Now, I will probably lose some of you as I reach into the void on this one, but there is another angle I theorize Craven and Williamson were attempting to take with the film, and that is making a satire on LA culture, which I kinda think Craven attempted to do with Scream 3, which itself relied heavily on Craven's approach to New Nightmare, which was a meta satire of his Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. My theory stems largely from the fact that we do get a lot of focus on Ellie being surrounded by the vapid shallowness of celebrity culture, given her job is scheduling guests for a talk show, which includes a few cameos along the way, as well as partially leaning on Hollywood's dog-eat-dog predatory nature, ironic given it's from the studio of Harvey fucking Weinstein, with the way it relies on Craven's well-known uncomfortable voyeuristic filmmaking style. There's even some loose humor found in Ellie and Jimmy being pretty glued into the fact that they're surrounded by superficiality, making the badly written, aggressively cliched high school drama seem intentional when it's clearly not. that. If you want to humor my idea, it doesn't make the film any better lying to yourself. Like Scream, it still has that fleeting corniness that I can't help but feel is conceptually interesting, but still bad nonetheless. Anyway, this actually very nicely takes us to Judy Greer, who I've been saving until last because not only does she give a genuinely fun, eccentric performance, but she did actually catch me off guard. Quick note, there is also this other random guy I never mentioned who keeps flirting with Ellie at work, who seems like he's supposed to have a bigger role, but in the climax he just sort of randomly dies off screen. Seriously, pops up like a half dozen times only for this to be his exit. Judy Greer plays Ellie's annoying narcissistic co-worker/manager Joni, who during the opening night of Jake's exhibition is revealed to be the film's Stu Mocker and is the murderous werewolf stalking Hollywood and the one who attacked Ellie and Jimmy. Jake reveals that he was born a werewolf and thus can control his violent urges, but ended up cursing Joni during a one-night fling, and now Joni is on the hunt to kill Ellie and anyone surrounding Jake so that she can have him all to herself. Yes, that's it. That's the motive. She's so consumed by the power of the curse that she wants to bone this dude for all eternity. But hey, do we really need a more substantial meaning than that when Hollywood is shallow and superficial anyway, as ironically confirmed by this studio meddling piece of shit film? Again, I get the humor in setting the climax on the set of a literal reconstruction of a Hammer horror, but what is legitimately hilarious is that just before Joni can kill Ellie, armed police arrive and she tries to flee, only to, I swear to God, see the police mockingly ask Ellie for a description of the werewolf, to which she calls Joni ugly and says she has a bony ass, causing a deeply offended Joni to return to give Ellie the middle finger and call her a liar, to which the police shoot her dead.
You have to separate the head from the...
Like, there's no other way to put it. It's sheer brilliance. It's perfection. Surely that was intentional. It must have been in the original script. It's like, it's far too fucking farcical not to be deliberate. And it fits with the whole shallowness of LA celebrity culture and the way people get on. So I'm going to say it's intentional, and I'm not going to have it any other way. By the way, don't go anywhere because the movie isn't over. There's still 10 more minutes, where out of the blue, suddenly Jake decides to steal Joni's motive and aims to kill Jimmy so he can have Ellie all to himself. You're already dating her, you dickhead. I don't think her douchey brother's going to stop you. It's like a contrived twist that like comes out of nowhere. It's such a U-turn because in the previous scene, he offers to sacrifice himself if Joni would leave Ellie alone. The twist should be that he despises his powers and is fully aware of the corruption and the mistakes that he's made, but now he just wants to relish in that power. You can see why I think that should be Jimmy that wants to relish, not this motherfucker. It's like post-it notes that got scattered all over the ground and they're trying to remember what order things were meant to be in. But anyway, look, maybe we'll get this great payoff where Ellie and Jimmy will finally transform and we'll get this crazy, chaotic final fight scene where werewolves kick each other's ass. Nope, we never see Ellie or Jimmy transform into a werewolf. All that fucking build up and it's such a cockblock. Their dog becomes more of a werewolf than they do. I've gone off the script by the way. Jimmy simply grows a pair of claws and spider pigs the fuck out of there while Jake tries to chase him before he finally gets Buffy the Vampire Slayer when they drive a silver cake spoon through his heart, ending this cursed nightmare once and for all. Okay, we're done. That no outro. We're done. I'm going to an off license. Stay safe. Stay away from this shit. And I'll see you all next time. Just requests, nonsense. Whatever.